Mike Wallace, he's a senior editor, contributor, analyst for Grind City Media at Grizzlies.com, but he covered the Miami Heat for many, many years, including the Big Three era when he was the Heat Index for ESPN. So perfect guy to talk to. Dwyane Wade goes into the Hall of Fame Saturday, Mike, without a doubt, the greatest Heat player of all time.
Yes, without a doubt, the greatest Heat player of all time. I don't even think for the body of work that he put together, the duration of his career. Obviously LeBron James is the greatest player to wear a Heat uniform. When you look at where he's going to end up at in terms of the historic records that he put up, but in terms of the greatest Heat player, the biggest Heat legend, all of those things you want to say, Dwyane Wade is the guy. He personifies what the Miami Heat has always been about. And, like you guys said on the introduction, man, when I was coming in, I mean, I've seen all three of his championships. Like I was on the beat for, watching him and seeing him all the way through. So knowing what he was as a player, seeing him develop, and then seeing him take this next phase of his life where he's involved in a lot of different areas and aspects. I've seen the entire Dwyane Wade, career catalog, man, and it's something that still continues to grow to this day.
When you say, greatest Heat player of all time, but LeBron James, greatest player to ever wear a Heat uniform, we've had this conversation this week, Crowder and I and Solana. Here's where it gets just a little tricky. Greatest basketball player to ever have donned the Heat uniform. Does it go LeBron, Shaq, Wade, or LeBron, Wade, Shaq?
I think it goes LeBron, Wade, Shaq, because, even though I say LeBron is the greatest player to ever wear a Heat uniform, but Dwyane is the greatest Heat player, LeBron's, you can argue that LeBron's peak of who he was as a player came in his 4 years in Miami. Like, I don't think he was ever more dominant than he was in those 4 years. So he reached his peak while also wearing a Heat uniform, which he kind of checks off both of those boxes. Shaq was, basically becoming a shell of himself by the time he got to the Miami Heat. Still effective, still a double-double, still the most dominant big, especially, during that 2006 championship season. But that wasn't his greatest seasons in terms of his dominance. So that's why I would put Dwyane Wade. We saw all of Dwyane's greatest years in a Miami Heat uniform. So that's why I would put him behind, ahead of Shaq in that 1, 2, 3 pecking order.
And Mike, when Dwyane Wade, Hall of Famer, just amazing player, he wasn't a great shooter though. He wasn't like, what was he great at? Like, because he was an amazing player, but like, what took him to the level of how we're speaking about Dwyane Wade right now?
Consistency. You know what I'm saying? Crowder, it was one of those things where for a better part of from post Kobe, all the way up until, I'm not even sure who's the best shooting guard in the league right now. But it was clear that Dwyane was, the East Coast, Eastern Conference version of Kobe Bryant. And so they did it differently. Kobe was more fluid, more graceful athletically because he was longer. But Dwyane, you couldn't stop him from getting to the basket. You couldn't stop him from posting up at 6'4", 6'3". And when he needed to hit big shots, he hit big shots. He wasn't a catch and shoot 3-point guy. He didn't even work on that part of his game until like the last 2 seasons that he was, in his consistent first run with the Miami Heat. And, he still was able to get whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. And when you look at, and all you have to do is talk to other shooting guards who played against him to ask, man, who was the toughest guy you had to defend? And they would tell you Dwyane Wade is right there. We just saw that come from a guy like DeMar DeRozan. You know what I mean? I remember, there was this debate, towards the end of Dwyane's first run with Miami was, did James Harden eclipse Dwyane Wade as the best shooting guard post-Kobe? And Dwyane had an answer for that. And Harden has gone downhill ever since then for the most part. So, he was great at a lot of different things, but he was a gamer and a competitor and a winner. And I think that's what puts him over the top from that standpoint.
You mentioned at the beginning, having seen Dwyane from the beginning and watched him, to where he is today. Have you marveled at his transformation from, young kid to businessman, game show host, activist, not afraid to use his voice and his position?
Yeah.
Like, have you marveled at his transformation?
You know what I marvel at is that he had all of those elements in him from day one. You know what I'm saying? Like he's one of these guys that came into the league knowing exactly what he was and who he was. And I remember, and I told him this recently too. I was like, man, I remember getting a postcard in the mail when I was an Associated Press voter for, and this was when I was covering colleges at the time. And I got a postcard in the mail from Marquette University pushing Dwyane Wade during his last year there as a All-American, Associated Press All-American coming out of Marquette. And, I didn't know much about him at that time. And then I watched the Final Four and he had the triple-double. And then I saw him, elevate up these draft workout charts. And then he went, into the draft and everything. And, he came into the league knowing I'm not the tallest guy at shooting guard. He basically played small forward to power forward when he was at Marquette, which is why he got the triple doubles. And he still came into the league with that same level of toughness. But the thing about Dwyane, to your point, is that he knew who he was as an activist. He had his voice. Shaq kind of introduced him to what it was going to take to become an NBA superstar and how you open up those kind of doors corporately. But he knew what he stood for and who he was. And the other part about Dwyane that people have to realize is that we also saw his public failures too. His businesses crashed the first time when he had the restaurants and all of those things. We saw a very nasty, public, bitter divorce and custody situation. So we saw him as vulnerable as he could be and also at all of his superpowers as a basketball player. And I think that's why people are endeared to Dwyane the way he is, because he didn't come across as this perfect person. He came across as a guy that had to grow through some public, embarrassments and some issues and some failures. And he still came out on top with a champion, a family, a beautiful wife, a beautiful life, and everything still in front of him now as an ambassador of the game and of the business world.
And Mike, you're on Heat Index, like you said, you were down here for all three championships, and you've talked to us in the past about just how strong and how influential that the Heat culture is and Heat organization. But we know that 03 draft, Darko Milicic went to Detroit over Wade. If Dwyane Wade's a Detroit Piston, is his career a lot different?
Nah, I think his career still ends in the championship, because you know what he does have at that point? He has Chauncey Billups alongside him. He has Tayshaun Prince. He has Ben Wallace. He has Rasheed Wallace. And that team probably would have been dominant from 2004 on through. Remember, Milicic went there as a bust at number 2, and they still got to 5 straight Eastern Conference Finals, and they won a championship, beating the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq. So if Dwyane had gone there, he might have gotten, he got to, when he got to Miami in 03, they were champions by 6. He probably would have gotten a championship in 4 or 5 if that was the case with Detroit. So, no, he would have been a winner no matter where he went in that situation. It would have just been quicker in Detroit because they didn't have to take a big downfall and climb their way back up the way some of the other teams in that lottery had to do. Cleveland, Toronto, Miami to a certain degree. The list goes on and on. Detroit was the one team that was ready to compete right there, and they still ended up with a bust at number 2 and still ended up getting to where they needed to go.
Mike, he should have had a ring in 04-05 anyways if Damon Jones doesn't mess up Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals on the Heat's floor. I mean, Wade playing with a busted rib did everything he could with an MVP caliber Shaq, and Damon Jones flushed it all down the damn toilet.
Yeah, and you can argue, man, and I don't even think this is debatable. You can argue the first 3 years of their career, Dwyane Wade was the best player coming out of that draft, and that included Carmelo and LeBron in terms of the most impactful. Now, they were impacting in ways where they put up, maybe some better numbers consistently, but in terms of what he meant to his team and how far he got his team, he was the first one to a title among those 3, and Carmelo never got one. So, LeBron got his championship, his NBA Finals experience the year after when they got swept by the Spurs in 7. I was there for that. But Dwyane got there and won in 6, and like you said, could have been there in 5 if he didn't have the injury and some of the other issues that happened in that series.
I think the only positive that would have come for Wade going to Detroit over Darko, Detroit's not exactly, glamorous and Hollywood the way Miami is. So I don't think he ever makes the transition into game show host, and we would have been saved from the Cube, which you have to admit is terrible. Even though we're celebrating Dwyane Wade, you have to admit that is just hot garbage.
You say hot garbage, man. Hey, I've watched. You know what? I haven't watched a full episode of The Cube to really know. They advertise.
There you go.
Like
That's all I need to hear.
Yeah. So
It usually triggers great TV.
Yeah. But you know what though? I just read a national piece on them last week. I was flying to Vegas for Team USA camp, and I sat down with Spoelstra there as well too. So you know, Spoelstra's proud of him. You know, obviously they grew up together in the organization. Spoelstra was his workout guy when he first got to Miami, and then you know, to get like there would be no Eric Spoelstra without Dwyane Wade, and you can also argue Dwyane. You know, Spoelstra helped Dwyane become a better player too because of the way he pushed him and held him accountable and didn't just allow him some of the things that LeBron's coaches have allowed LeBron to get away with, or Carmelo's coaches. It was never, you know, they had their sideways moments quite a few times, but at the end of the day, those guys are where they are. Both of them going to end up in the Hall of Fame because of each other, because they were in each other's lives and careers. So, but having said that, yeah, I haven't watched The Cube, and now that you gave that glowing recommendation, I probably won't be watching it anytime soon.
Mike, I know this is almost impossible. I made a top 10 Dwyane Wade moments list. What's one that stands out to you from his career, whether it's winning a title or an individual moment of brilliance? Like, what's one thing you think of when you think of Dwyane Wade on the court?
Okay, on the court. That was you know, I was something else came to mind, and I'll share that in a second. But you know, on the court to me, what stood out was it's funny because being in you know, I forgot, is it Kaseya Center now, right? It was American Airlines Arena when I was there and all those kind of things. But the moment when he hit a shot at the end of the game and jumped up on the table right in front of Mickey Harrison in the ownership group and said, "This is my house," right? And just like he hit a game winner and did that. And I'm like, man, and the place went crazy. It wasn't, I don't even know if it was it might have been a playoff game, but it definitely wasn't a finals game or anything like that. But to see him do that and be able to deliver, and there was no question that it was his house. And that came, I believe that play came right at the same time where it was he and Kobe vying for the preeminent shooting guard title in the league right then. And, you know, he wanted to show, hey, look, I'm every bit as dominant, as good as the guy on the other side of the coast. But this is my side. This is my town. This is my team. And when he did that, that stood out to me. The other thing was when he bought his mom a church in Chicago, and she had gotten her life together, and she committed her life to Christ and went about, you know, trying, you know, to disciple other people and bring other people closer to their faith. And his greatest gift to her was not a house, was not a luxury vehicle. He bought her a church so that they can impact lives on the south side of Chicago, man. And to see that church and to see what, you know, that meant to his mother, you know, Jolinda, that was big time. And to see how Dwyane was so proud when he was in that church with her, that stood out to me. And then the other time was when he and Gary Payton went at it, that damn near came to blows in the playoffs on the way to that 2006 title, man. Those are the three things that stand out.
Those are excellent. Someone texted in as you spoke of him, and I think this is a perfect way to end the segment here as he goes into the Hall of Fame on Saturday. Somebody texts in, "We are blessed to have had him as part of our city and sports history." And that is the God's honest truth.
You're talking about me or Dwyane Wade? Because I want to say,
I thought they were talking about me, to be quite honest. I was, but maybe it was me or you. I don't know about Crowder, but yes, no, I think it was about Dwyane Wade. What on the way out, we have 30 seconds. Is there any scenario that Damian Lillard is not a member of the Miami Heat at the beginning of next season?
Unless the only way it's not going to happen is if Adam Silver steps in and says, because of competitive balance, he cannot send Damian Lillard. If he pulls a David Stern and does the CP3 thing all over again and sends him somewhere else, that's the only way I see it not happening. There's just too much going on, and I don't think there's a second or third best suitor who would make this deal happen. I just don't see it. It's too much smoke, and I think eventually is going to happen. They're holding up the schedule, though, man, because these schedules are supposed to be coming out next week. And that deal is still holding up the NBA when it comes to releasing the schedule, because obviously if Dame is in Miami, there's a lot more national interest in what's going on in Miami, and they got another big three that's ready to roll again.
So Mike Wallace is saying just be patient, Heat fans, right?
Yeah, because there's no way he's going back to Portland, right? So if you eliminate that, and you say, okay, what else is it going to take for him to eventually get to Miami? At some point, and you can also look at a whole bunch of collusion, issues and all that kind of stuff. What are these teams doing to make it happen or not happen? But at the end of the day, I think it's too much heading in that direction. It's going to happen. I just believe that it's going to be a matter of time, and then let it happen. Do what you got to do, and then just move. And Portland will be able to move on, and so will Miami.
Mike Wallace, Grind City Media, and a longtime friend of the program. Thank you for making some time to celebrate Dwyane Wade with us and to bash Damon Jones with us.
Hey, anytime, guys. And Solano set me up and hooked me up with it. Crowder, next time I'm up there, man, you, me, and him with your boys are going to get on that boat, man, because he promised me a ticket on your boat next time we go out there to go fishing, man.
Oh, we set. Well, let's leave Solana, Mike. Let's just me and you go, because he is a headache.
All right, that'll work. Whatever it takes, baby. Whatever it takes.
Tell you what, you bring Solana, you might get a Alabama dock situation going on there. Playing cards.
Gracious. Asking questions, talking too much. Shut up. Just fish.
All right.
Asking
Thanks, Mike.
questions. All right, guys.